Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Friday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. The Lakers lose again, this time to Minnesota. But did they show signs of life? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, sometimes on weekends. No matter how or where you get your podcasts, this one's always going to be free, never behind a paywall. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where over 22,000 subscribers continue to be very upset with the Lakers and Darvin Ham and the inconsistency and the injuries and all of it following another loss. The Lakers' fifth in 6 games, this time to Minnesota. In Minnesota, 118-111, the final score. The Lakers, again, have lost 5 of 6 since the in-season tournament final against Indiana. And the one game that they won was a squeaker against the Spurs. So plenty to unpack tonight after the game on Thursday night. I do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/Locked on NBA and use the code Locked on NBA, all lowercase, Locked on NBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Talk a lot about, Darvin's comments about how to get out of this thing and all and whatever. But on a night where LeBron sat, Gabe Vincent sat, both of it sounded like maintenance, more than anything with the grind. Vincent coming off the injury and LeBron old. This was a game probably they were set to lose anyway. Second night of a back-to-back, no LeBron James. Andy, am I being too much of a homer to actually have left this game much more encouraged about the team than I was when it started?
No, first of all, that wouldn't make you a homer. That would make you a Pollyanna. Like a homer, you could actually be way more upset about anything that isn't a Laker win. But I don't think you're being a Pollyanna either.
Or an apologist.
Okay, apologist. A John Ireland, if you will.
Exactly. Our friend John Ireland, the Lakers broadcaster, who describes himself as a shameless Lakers apologist. Am I pulling an Ireland here, Ian?
Yeah, first of all, he does not need to describe himself as a shameless Lakers apologist because anybody can tell listening to him. But no, I don't think that's inaccurate at all. I mean, to be candid, heading into this game, you and I both thought there was a chance that with no LeBron and no Gabe Vincent and whoever still on a minutes limit or whatever's going on with various elements, second end of a back-to-back against the best team in the West, that it could make sense for the Lakers to just sit Anthony Davis in this game too, let him just heal up a little bit more with that ankle and with the groin injury and all of that different stuff. And turned out AD played. And honestly, I'm glad that he did because it laid the foundation for what I thought was, I want to make it clear, not a moral victory for the Lakers at all. This is big boy basketball, and they need to start putting wins back in the column like now. It's important. Anthony Davis actually described Saturday's game against Oklahoma City as must win for them. I think
I'm not sure I'd do that. I may have avoided the must win, but well, let's talk about that later because it's an important indication of where they are.
But that being said, there was a lot in this game tonight, I think, from just an intensity and an urgency and a focus and a purpose standpoint that hasn't been there for the last couple of weeks, basically since the IST, that if that stuff becomes the baseline moving forward, it will not solve everything, but it will solve certain things that we haven't been seeing before.
Well, it's funny. Like I remember last year, there were when the Lakers were in the thick of their worst moments, there was always this sort of hope. Is this the thing that's going to turn them around? Here we go. That's the moment. This is going to be that's going to start a run or whatever. And oftentimes, look, that can happen where you get, Ja Morant returned to the Grizzlies and they've won 2 games in a row. Like that could be something, the return of Ja Morant can be a thing that turns around your team. But oftentimes it's a slow progression. It is a gradual change. It is a thing where, if everything is out of focus, things become in focus. And if there was an upside to LeBron not playing in Thursday's game, I think it's this. 2 things happen. Second night of a back-to-back, no LeBron James against the best team in the Western Conference, which I think you can make the argument then makes you the best team in the NBA, just based on conference strength. Best team in the Western Conference have lost 1 game at home. Minnesota has all year long. You are, by every right, expected to lose that game. Lakers are a lousy road team. So you have a certain freedom. And then the second part of it, you talk about the defensive intensity. When LeBron doesn't play, you have, if we have any chance of winning this game, it is going to be because we play good defense. There is a 0% chance that we can win if we don't show out on the defensive side of the ball. And I think that can be kind of a catalyst for better play as well. They're not better when LeBron doesn't play, but it can have psychological effects that are beneficial to a team that is in the position the Lakers are in.
Well, also, too, if they're going to have to lean into that defensive identity, which should be really their calling card identity, period, because
yes,
I think it's become pretty clear now 30 games into this season, 29, there are things that they can do and frankly absolutely have to do offensively, fixing it in order to really be a contender this season. But the truth is they are likely never going to be as good offensively as they are defensively. Defense is what will win them games, small and big picture moving forward. So in certain respects, they have to put their defense first, I think, more often than they put their offense, because I think their ceiling and potential is much higher on that end. And with that in mind,
certainly is right now.
Well, I think it will be, period. I mean, look, we've had now 6 years and 2 coaches of the LeBron and AD era with those 2 as the foundation. And the offense has been problematic no matter what incarnation of the roster. And, it would take a week's worth of shows to break down all the theories as to why, but them's the facts. And we've seen them play really high-end defense. And if you're looking to do that sort of out of desperation at will for 1 game and sustain it for 48 minutes, which I think they clearly tried to do tonight, it is actually easier for them to do that without LeBron. That's not throwing shade at LeBron. It's just the reality of where LeBron is chronologically in his career and the spots that he has to pick defensively. It is, as you said, they are not a better team without LeBron, but it is easier for them to do that thing without LeBron.
Well, yeah, I think the combination of the awareness of the need to be that locked in, because you don't have the sort of the safety net that LeBron has proven to be, because yes, I think it is not hard to find any number of statistics that show that the Lakers struggle when LeBron doesn't play. But yeah, you're right. I mean, LeBron is not on a night-to-night basis a guy who is going to help you lock down. He's not always a negative, but he's not Anthony Davis, to say the least. And so I want to talk about Darvin and what Darvin said after the game and some of the other things. Austin Reaves echoed this a little bit, and then get into D'Lo, because this was a fascinating night, I think, for D'Lo, and often what he said after the game as well. And for people who think that maybe we're spending too much time on Russell, if the Lakers are going to get out of this slump, he's going to have to be a big part of it. And so the focus on D'Lo is necessary, and we'll get to all of it next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by BetterHelp, and December is now in the home stretch. It's been a month full of holidays, which can be awesome for some people, but really stressful, even depressing for others. And whether it's because of the family that you don't get along with, the economic toll these celebrations can take, it can sometimes feel like comparison shopping, keeping up with the Joneses, the social media, Facebook effect of it all. Holidays sometimes just don't resonate for certain people. The act of gift giving for many people can be really, really stressful. And therapy can be a bright spot amidst all the anxiety and uncertainty, something that you can look forward to help you feel centered and grounded. I can personally speak to how much therapy helped me during a really difficult period in my life for me and my family, and sitting down, talking with somebody, it was huge. And BetterHelp has connected over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient, accessible anywhere, 100% online. There's no waiting rooms, no traffic, and it's affordable. So just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist. If things aren't clicking, you can switch easily to a new therapist anytime. So if you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can help you get there. Just visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
Locked on Lakers also brought to you by Logix. You know, on this show, you get a lot of in-depth analysis, no question, but you also get some hot takes, right? Let me give you my hottest take of the day. The best lineup in LA and the surrounding areas right now is the lineup of auto loans at Logix. They start off at the top with one of my favorites, the proven and dependable new and used vehicle loans. You can count on these guys to give you the low rates that you want and save you big time bucks. And next up, they've got an exciting new rookie sensation in their electric vehicle loans with super low rates and flexible payment terms. Rounding out the lineup, Andy, they've got their auto refinancing loans and lease buyout loans. With these guys, you could lower your monthly payments and get on the road to owning your car faster. Look, I know it's a hot take, but seriously, no one can beat the lineup at Logix. Visit your local Logix branch right here in LA and the surrounding areas and let one of their amazing team members help you, or just apply online in minutes at logixbanking.com/car. That's LOGIX banking.com/car. Darvin said after the game that, kind of what it amounts to bust out of this slump to some degree is just a matter of continuing to play. You have to continue to play hard. You have to continue to put in the effort, put in the time, and believe that it's going to turn around and you can start playing like you had earlier in the season. And I think that's going to be a really frustrating response for some fans. And obviously, players can play better. Coaches can coach better. But broadly, do you think he's wrong?
I mean, he's not wrong in the sense that you do have to keep playing and you do have to keep doing all the work and you do have to operate from a sense of belief. Like, he's not wrong there. I just don't know what else he'd say. Like, I don't consider it a right or wrong. I just consider it
you're right, but is there a more complicated or a more sort of technical answer to this question? If he, they need to execute. But right, that's what I'm getting at. Is this a question of, look, and like I said, Darvin, tonight, Thursday night, the Darvin-induced controversy following the game is that Austin Reaves played 27 minutes, and Russell, who struggled for much of the game, played 38. Cam Reddish played 37. He leaned hard into the five guys who started. Davis 39 minutes, Taurean Prince 37, Hachimura 34. Nice to see Rui get some extended run. 37 for Reddish, 38 for Russell, and that left 27 for Reaves, who had 20 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. Is it a matter of like, hey, get your rotation straightened out? There were a lot of questions about roles after the game and whether or not guys understand what they are supposed to be doing and what their role is on this team. And I think there is still some confusion over that. Is that a coaching problem or is that a circumstance and context problem?
I think it's both. I think it is a contextual problem in the sense that they've had guys in and out of the lineup, and certain guys only available seemingly for a specified amount of minutes, and it's made it difficult to build the continuity that really solidifies and clarifies roles.
Right. You can't have easily clarified and solidified roles when you have a different group of people playing every night.
Right. That being said, said this now a few games in a row, they often look rudderless offensively. It's pretty clear that there are things offensively that Darvin needs to instill better in what they're doing. Like, yes, sometimes things come down to make shots. And if you make shots, it doesn't matter how well you did or did not execute, but execution still matters. Tonight, I will not lie, I thought it was a little peculiar that on a shorthanded night when Reaves was often a spark, that he only played 27 minutes. Do I think it's the reason that they lost? No, I think the reason that they lost is they were shorthanded against a better team, which made their margin for error really small. I guess long and the short of it is everybody can do better, including Darvin. And I would like to see at times more evidence of what Darvin's real specific plans are beyond buy-in. Like the buy-in part, he's awesome at. Do I think those next steps in terms of what you see from the really great coaches are still lacking at times with Darvin? Sure. I don't think they're awful either, but yeah. I mean, if that's what you were asking me.
Yeah. I mean, what's the balance here between, they're doing it wrong. Versus you are in a bad spot that happens over the course of an 82-game season that has ebbs and flows, and they've been on the high end of it as well over the course of the year. I mean, I think it's really important. Like, you don't want to judge a team by its worst stretch, and certainly this is the worst stretch the Lakers have been in. And I think you have to be real careful about making sort of finite, definitive statements about what this team is and where they can be based on their worst stretch. That said, it's also possible to have overvalued the run through the IST, particularly given the early games of that, given the who they had to play in group play. But yeah, that was essentially what I'm getting at. It's like, what is the relationship between coaching, between rotations, between individual players just having to play better, between potentially just misunderstanding what the strengths and weaknesses of this roster were going to be. For example, we'll talk about Russell in the next segment. Like, why didn't Reaves play more to some degree without LeBron? I think the answer might have been because as a primary ball handler, it was raggedy. It can be very raggedy when Reaves is in charge of the offense. Particularly when AD's not on the floor. And I'll totally blame that on Reaves, obviously. And then Reaves and Russell have been difficult to play together. So, I think that probably was part of it. Is like, you can choose the guy who's scoring, you can choose the guy who was greasing the offense better, despite not having a good shooting night himself. And, I think that is probably where he leaned, because it's hard to play them together. Maybe he should have played them together.
Well, it's funny, actually.
Let's get into this next, though, with D'Lo.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by PrizePicks, the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. And instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 players, stats projections, and just watch the winnings roll in up to 25 times your money. And with basketball season full swing, you can pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League, created specifically for projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, LeBron James and Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made plus receptions. And with PrizePicks reboot policy, your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For NFL games, NBA games, if you have a player who exits the first half with an injury, doesn't return in the second, that player gets rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance. That is huge. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use that code LockedOnNBA, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. And prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
Look, to be clear, like, I don't know what the answer to that question was. Like, and should Reaves and Russell play together a little bit more? I mean, the data on that early in the season was really bad. So, I mean, that's part of the reason I think that starting lineup was broken up and Reaves was sent to the bench. So, there is some data there. And then when they play together, if Darvin really wants to keep Reddish on the floor for his defensive abilities, Taurean Prince is probably going to play as well, and that probably pushes Rui off the floor because you need the spacing that and then the defensive questions, because keep Rui on the floor with like the combinations here are tricky. My point is just that the combinations can be trickier to put together than I think they're giving credit for. The ripple effect of playing a combination of player X and player Y can mean player Z has to do something different too that may not be what you want to do. Russell's game was, I thought, interesting because he broke out in the fourth quarter, ended up with 17 points. I think all but 13 of them were in the fourth. And so he was 2 for 12. Yeah, 2 for 12 going into the fourth quarter. But it was a much better game, I thought, than he had played in almost any game relatively recently.
It depends on how you're defining better. For the first three quarters, D'Angelo was not particularly effective. He had moments, like pockets of moments over the first three quarters where he did some good things, but he also had a lot of pockets where, frankly, he looked pretty bad. But what I did think the game was, even during those first three quarters, beyond the fourth, where he legitimately played very well and was part of a rally that looked like the Lakers might actually be able to pull off the impossible in this game before eventually they just ran
They were
out.
up one, I think, near the end of the third, right? Or right at the beginning of the fourth. Forget which one it was.
But what I thought about this game from D'Lo was that it was just reassuring because he spent it looking for his shot, looking to make plays, looking to be involved. And over the last 4 or 5 games leading up to that, it wasn't just that D'Lo had been in a slump, because he'd been in a pretty pronounced shooting funk, and that happens.
Yes.
It's that he seemingly was becoming less and less involved on the floor by design. Like in the Chicago game, to me, it looked like he was trying to just stay out of the way.
I would agree.
Especially in the second half of the game. And you can't have that from a player,
especially not from your point guard.
No, you can't have that from your point guard. You can't have that from somebody who is expected and needed to be one of the best skill players on this team.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked that D'Lo maintained his aggressiveness in the first three quarters. Now, to be clear, that ain't enough. Like, he said something interesting after the game, like so many words asked about the shooting slump that he's in. And also about, like, I don't know, ways for the team to get better, ways for him to get better. And he said, basically just like, I need to make shots. He's like, I need to start making shots again. He said, when I'm not making shots, I try to lean into my defense to make sure that I'm contributing in some way and like trying to offset that slump. But then he said in so many words, candidly, I'm not out there for my defense. Like,
what he
defense,
said, that's not what I do, is what
right.
he said.
So then he took it all the way back full circle when he said, I need to start making shots again. And for what it's worth to Laker fans who are unhappy with D'Angelo Russell, which is to say all of you, he is as aware that he is playing poorly right now as all of you, and he's not shying away from it. Again, the onus is on him to figure out how to get himself back to the form that we saw for like the first month of the season. But he is highly aware that what he's doing right now ain't close to enough.
And everybody can put away the tinfoil hats if he's tanking his own trade value and he's trying to suck on purpose so he can't get traded and all that stuff. D'Angelo Russell's level of play has almost nothing to do with whether or not he's going to get traded. Almost. It's not completely irrelevant. But, Russell will go to a team that is willing to take on the contract that he has and is willing to, take on the draft picks and whatever it is that the Lakers are willing to throw in. And they're willing to give up the thing that they're going to give up. Like, Russell is a number to the team that would acquire him, particularly given that the teams right now that are out there in the trade market, Chicago, Utah, whatever, these are rebuilding teams. These are not teams in the thick of a playoff race that are trying to contend. So D'Angelo Russell, who is a player option for next year that he would love to opt out of.
That's the real thing.
I was talking to a buddy who's like, he has no value. There's no one who's going to look, yes, he can absolutely outplay the $18 million he's going to make, even if it's to sign a 3-year, $45 million deal where he's making less per year, but gets, a guaranteed 3 years out of it or whatever. Hachimura is making $17 million. You look around this league, 15 to 20 million like players, you'd be surprised who some of these guys are. And the notion that Russell can't outplay an $18 million contract to at least get a longer term deal than one more year, you're just wrong if you think that can't happen. So I can guarantee you, Russell is not trying to tank his own value. And I think what I mean when I said that what he did on Thursday was better, certainly than Chicago, which was the most glaring example. And then these other games was because he was 2 of 12 going into the fourth quarter. The 12 for me, even though the shot selection, he was unsure of the perimeter shot, uncomfortable with it, but he attacked the basket the entire night. He tried to get downhill. It led to some turnovers. It led to some awkward plays, but he was pushing the action as much as he could all night long. And you, I think, made the point going into that game that returning to Minnesota, whatever it is, he might have a little bit of extra hop. And I think he did. And I think it was probably because he was playing against the Timberwolves. But whatever the reason, he looked like he was at the very least going to try. If I'm going to suck being proactive, as opposed to sucking doing what I did in Chicago. And even what I meant with the difference between Russell and Reaves was even when he was playing, when the results weren't good, because he was making the more decisive passes, and he plays it more like a point guard as opposed to a scoring guard, which is more like what Reaves is doing. To me, the flow of the offense, while still not great, was a little bit better. And so when you're short ball handlers and you're you have option 1 or option 2, that's what you have. I think that's probably what Darvin saw, at least in that. I could be wrong because I wasn't there to ask him the question, but it is really encouraging for Lakers fans that Russell, even when he played poorly in proactive terms.
He looked more like D'Angelo Russell just having a poor game over the first 3 quarters, as opposed to, I don't know who the hell this guy is. He just looks like a really bad basketball player, which is the case against Chicago. I thought it was interesting too when D'Lo did, because we touched on this briefly, when he brought up the idea that, they really haven't seen a look of LeBron, AD, Vando, him and Reaves, or, I know other people have asked, and I know I've raised the question of, we've seen very little LeBron, AD, Rui, Reaves, which was often like a closing group in the playoffs. And D'Lo did note, some of this has been due to injuries hurting availability, and
Vanderbilt is clearly not Vanderbilt,
right. The opportunity to do some of this. But I would say it would be nice to see Darvin try it a little bit more, just because these were things that did work last year. They were part of what built not just wins, but like a spirit and a chemistry. And, I do think some of the reason that Reaves and D'Lo wasn't working as well this year is Reaves is just more scouted and players are just more familiar with him. And you're on to how he plays both sides of the ball. But I do think some of it was Vando not being available cut into the optionality and the different ways you can offset certain things that Reaves and D'Lo don't do well. Look, I was a proponent of breaking up that starting unit before Darvin actually did it. So I'm not being critical of Darvin on this at all, as far as not.
And by the way, just because they're not starting doesn't mean you can still put those groups together.
Right. But I was going to say, I'm not being critical of Darvin for not going back to that look as often as he did last year. But there are certain things that worked well last year. Like, I know the sample size with LeBron, AD, and Rui, if you look at the advanced numbers, is not good, but it also isn't very big. And I do think you need to sometimes let things breathe a little bit, particularly if there is a sample size of it having worked at all. And, it's not exactly the same team, and, it's not identical. And there are guys who are playing roles this year that weren't even on the team last year, much less expected.
Right, even the same guys don't play the same way from year to year.
Right, and look, Cam Reddish, who, by the way, I thought had a really nice game tonight. I don't think there was an anticipation, even among the most optimistic in the front office, that he would have this role.
If you're out there wondering why these lineups aren't playing together as much, the answer is Cam Reddish. And the way to see those lineups is to play Reddish less. That is how you do it. You could play Taurean Prince less as well, but you're certainly not going to put Vanderbilt and Reddish on the floor together.
We can talk about this more.
I just don't think
I disagree with
get away with that for long stretches unless you are going to just try to be the lockiest down defensive team in the NBA.
They may have
for 48 minutes.
It's not 48 minutes, but
Plus, I think you get benefits from staggering those guys, but that's a separate issue.
But you've brought this up a few times. Again, we can talk about a different show. You've brought this up a few times, the idea that those two together isn't really a thing that can work. I disagree. And I think they may have to at times because they are, I think, emblematic of the highest upside for this team, if not the most ideal version of basketball.
Are you talking about a lineup, just so I understand, like that with Reddish and with Russell and Reaves together, or just sewing those guys on the floor? If you can put, other floor spacers, I guess, on the floor.
I'm not as concerned about the floor spacing because, again, I think the upside for this team is always going to be higher defensively than it will. They have no outside shooting consistently. So to some degree, who gives an F? You know what I mean? Like, there's no proven spacing combination on this team. So to get away more often than you need to, I think, from what's working in order to try to give you the spacing that you're not getting anyway,
we'll see.
I think you can go too far with that.
You could. They may have to at least try it. But we'll see what happens on this must-win game on Saturday. That's a tall order to call a game in Oklahoma City a must-win game, but we'll see how it goes. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to hang out with 22,000 subscribers to the program and anticipate what will happen on Saturday, a game against Oklahoma City, where I would expect everyone to be available. So we see how it goes then. We'll see everybody on Sunday.